Americano newspaper. Best newspaper in analysis in the state of Illinois. With over 20,000 copies in each edition, El Sueño Americano is available in all versions. El Sueño Americano Lake County, El Sueño Americano Pilsen, El Sueño Americano Southeast, El Sueño Americano Aurora, and sooner in many more regions. El Sueño Americano, the other side of news. The best analysis in regional, state, and national politics. El Sueño Americano is your alternative information in championnews.net. The conservative voice for Illinois news and commentary on education, pensions, and politics.
Hello, and welcome back to The Bottom Line. This is Deb Gordill's Chicago political talk show host here, and I'm so glad that you're joining me. I'm on Monday through Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. on 1590 a.m. and again on 1470 a.m. for those of you closer to Indiana who want to hear what's happening in Cook County and in Chicago and sort of in the world of politics here, Republican, conservative thoughts and values. And yesterday's show was Memorial Day. We had a wonderful veteran on the show, and we're hoping to have a lot more patriotic shows this week in honor of the Memorial Day holiday. And a great veteran, Bill Luna, who you may have heard on my show before, had said, you really have to meet this guy, Manuel Barbosa, who has done amazing things here in Illinois. And so he piqued my curiosity. And so on the phone today, to be on our first segment, is Manuel Barbosa. Manuel, welcome to the show.
Well, good morning. Very happy to be with you.
Thank you so much. And so you are a retired judge, a bankruptcy judge. Did you retire early because there were so many bankruptcies after the economy collapsed, or did you just say, this is it, it's my time to retire?
The latter, primarily. I
was just joking.
Approximately 15 years, which is what I did on the bankruptcy court. I enjoyed it tremendously, but I other agendas I wanted to get into, including, of course, 5 grandchildren.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, absolutely, and this is a great time to enjoy them. Summer's kicking off. You were a bankruptcy judge in Chicago, in Illinois, in a certain part of the state?
Well, it's the Northern District of Illinois, which, of course, includes approximately the northern third of the state. I sat primarily in Rockford, which is the other venue where we have a federal court, although I also covered branch courts in Geneva and Wheaton, and occasionally I'd be in Chicago as well.
Right, yeah, Rockford. That's where we have our chairman for the Republican National Hispanic Assembly Group, Gloria Cadilla, and we also have the Winnebago commissioner, who's also Latino and a member of the Republican National Hispanic Assembly, John Guevara. He's the Winnebago commissioner, I think, out there right now. So before you became a judge, you were at Northern Illinois University, or you're still there. You sit on the board there for their law school, correct, NIU?
Yes, that's correct.
That's exciting. And you also sit on another board. You had mentioned it to me, the Metro.
The Metro Board of Directors, that's correct. I've been there for approximately 6 months now.
Oh, 6 months up at the board. So do we have any new exciting news coming out, like what's going to be happening with the board? Are we going to see some new Metro stuff that's going to affect us, that's going to be great for the people?
Well, I think we have an ongoing effort to improve service to folks, primarily upgrading equipment and just little innovations in programming to have the commuters better informed as to what's going on, to avoid, to be more timely, and basically nothing dramatic, but small incremental steps aimed at improving service to all the commuters in the area.
Sure. I know that there are times when I want to find out how to get somewhere that I don't want to drive to necessarily. I'll go to the Metro website online page. So I'm really grateful for the website that Metro has. It really helps us a lot. So I also recall that you said you presently live in Elgin, and you were involved with the SPIDA in the 70s. That was pretty big Latino sort of organization. If I remember in the 70s, I went to Lakeview High School in Chicago on the north side here, not far from Wrigley Field. There was an SPIDA club. I wasn't a member of it, but I know that there was an SPIDA club there. You want to talk about Aspida? You are still in touch with them? Because they're doing some other stuff. They went from like being a club to becoming like a school.
Well, I know at the time Speedo was involved in numerous things. They're actually quite active nationally, although I was most familiar with the Chicago organization. But they were involved in tutoring high school students, tutoring elementary students, coming up with a reading program for young kids, and essentially doing things to motivate kids to go into higher education through scholarship assistance, through academic tutoring. And it's been a few years since I've been involved, but they were a very dynamic organization, and I certainly would expect that today they're doing many of the same things and probably have grown considerably.
Okay, let me ask you another thing. You also were the assistant state's attorney in Kane County for a number of years before becoming a judge.
I was. That was right out of law school. I was there for close to 2 years. It was a very good experience in the sense that it acquainted me with the whole system and all the persons who operated the system, and it gave me a great introduction to the world of law practice out there. I went into private practice very shortly after that, and then in 1980, when Governor Thompson created the Illinois Human Rights Commission, I was fortunate and privileged to be named the first chairman of that commission, and I somehow, time just flew under Governor Edgar. I served in that capacity as well. I ended up serving a total of 18 years prior to going on the bench.
Wow. And that's Republican town. I mean, you got your feet wet in Republican politics, I would guess, being in Kane County at that time. And then, of course, Governor Thompson, who we all know. Are you still involved in Republican activities? Do you still, I know that as a judge, you have to be apolitical, so you can't get involved in anything. But now you're retired. Is it an activity that you still get involved within the Republican Party, maybe in Kane County or elsewhere?
I expect to probably be involved. It's almost unavoidable when you're concerned about community matters and sort of the advancement of your community. You almost can't do it without some political involvement. As someone once said, politics is the process by which the resources are allocated in the public realm, and a lot of our community programs and our search for advancement deals with the allocation of resources, and so I think it's unavoidable. Plus, I have some very good friends who are involved in the
Sueño Americano newspaper, best newspaper in analysis in the state of Illinois, with over 20,000 copies in each edition. El Sueño Americano is available in all versions: El Sueño Americano Lake County, El Sueño Americano Pilsen, El Sueño Americano Southeast, El Sueño Americano Aurora, and sooner in many more regions. El Sueño Americano, the other side of news, the best analysis in regional, state, and national politics. El Sueño Americano is your alternative information in championnews.net, the conservative voice for Illinois news and commentary on education, pensions, and politics.
Hello and welcome back to The Bottom Line. This is Deb Gordills, and I am on the phone with Manuel Barbosa, and we're just talking about present-day involvement that Manuel is activities right now, not just with the Republican Party, I think just politically in general, and how you have to be part of the political process, right, Manuel, in order to get the resources that you need for the advancement of programs that you believe in. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. I think, unfortunately, some people, are sort of turned off by the idea of being involved in politics. But the reality is that many of their aspirations and things that they seek are best achieved by partaking in the process, and we can all choose the means by which we participate. But it just seems to me, if you write off that's the whole system, you're writing off a very important part of your life, your civic and public life for your community.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to get involved. And I know often on this show we tell people you got to come out and you got to get involved. And a lot of them say, oh, gosh, I really don't want to do politics. And I don't believe in the manner in which they do this. But it is crucial. It is important to to get involved, even if it's at your local school council or some community club that is helping veterans or helping the children. All of it, you'll find that you'll eventually going to meet the alderman of the community or the committeeman in the neighborhood, Democrat or Republican, who's going to want, to invite you to things, and it just sort of elevates. All of a sudden, one day somebody starts with just writing a petition or starting at a lower level of school environment or community environment. Next thing you know, they're sitting at the governor's inaugural address at the table because your involvement is so crucial to how elections come out and where resources come from.
Exactly. I recently spoke to a group of parents in a school district here who are sort of taking a course on leadership. And one of the things I pointed out to them is that every vote counts. We had a local Kane County race here where one judicial candidate won the race by 7 votes, and 7 people determined who's going to hold the judicial post, the man who makes so many decisions that can impact the life of the citizens here, from criminal to civil decisions, etc. So I think people need to realize that their voice and their participation has more impact than they often think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I also want to ask you, now that we're talking about these kinds of elections, tell me a little bit about the Rauner campaign. We have a election coming up right now where the gubernatorial candidate, Bruce Rauner, is running against the incumbent Pat Quinn. Your thoughts on that whole race?
Well, I've been sort of studying it as most people. You're reading editorials, comments, etc. I'm not sure that I have a strong predilection at this point. I think that when things are going poorly, as they certainly have in Illinois for some time, there's a tendency, of course, to want to look for new solutions and go to someone new. And I think that's always an advantage that perhaps a challenger may have. And that may well be the case with Mr. Rauner, although, as I think the media pointed out this weekend, we're still awaiting to hear details of his particular plan. And I think before I jump into anything, I probably would like to see that. But there is a somewhat of a feeling that where we are right now requires some kind of a major change.
Yeah, let me ask you something. You have two, you have the incumbent Pat Quinn, and you have Bruce Rauner, the challenger. You as Latino, I'm a Latina. Where do you think they are on Hispanic issues? Do you think Quinn has done enough, has partnered enough? And do you think that Rauner, with the Latina running mate, that's sufficient and enough to win Latino support? How do you think Latinos play out in both these camps?
Well, again, having just recently retired, I'm slowly delving into these deeper waters in terms of politics, and particularly in public discourse, such as a radio show. I'm perhaps a little gun shy and reluctant, but I don't think either party has been particularly great to Hispanics historically. The rhetoric of one side or the other may appear to favor Hispanics one time or another. I see that my good friend Manny Sanchez, whose opinion I have a high regard for, has come out very publicly in favor of Mr. Rauner, and I suspect a lot of it has to do with the feeling that we do need a change at this point. When things are going poorly, you're willing to try something new, and I think Mr. Rauner may benefit from that. But I also think most thoughtful voters are perhaps holding back to hear some specifics and some particulars. As far as Hispanics are concerned, I think Democrats in Illinois have tended to do fairly well, or at least that's been the perception. But I also think that moderate Republicans, certainly under Edgar and Thompson, did very well by the Latino community. and Mr. Roger gives some signs that he may be of that same vein, but as I say, time will tell.
Yeah, I've had a chance to have numerous personal chats with Bruce Rauner early on in his campaign. Now it's kind of tough to find him. He's in the thick of things, and he's traveling all over the state. But I did get a chance to talk to him, and of course to Evelyn. I know early on when he was searching for a Latina candidate, he asked me if I knew of some people, and I did give him the names of a few Latinos and Latinas that he may consider. Evelyn wasn't one of them, but I sure like Evelyn. I didn't know her that well, but she is really a dynamo and really sweet, and I think she'd be a great leader for Latinos. She's an attorney as well. I don't know if you know Evelyn Sanguinetti. But I was really kind of surprised when Pat Quinn didn't come out after former Senator Paul Simon's daughter stepped down as his lieutenant governor. I thought for sure he'd come up with a Hispanic running mate, which he did not. That was a disappointment to me, given the fact that I thought everybody knew the Republican candidates, all of them, including Bill Brady, who also had asked me about Hispanics as a running mate. And I know Oberweis was thinking about it, and Dillard, but Quinn didn't come out with one. He could have pointed almost any one of them. And for me, that was a big sign of, at what point will the Democrat Party in the state of Illinois, should have by now ran a Latino for U.S. Senate. We know Ted Cruz is out in Texas, and you have Raul Labrador, who's a congressman out of Idaho, both Republicans, and you have Republican Senator Marco Rubio Cubano out of Florida. We have two governors that the Republican Party has supported, and that's Brian Sandoval, and the governor of Nevada, and the woman Susana Martinez, the governor of New Mexico, who happened to have gone to Buffalo Grove High School, by the way, here in Illinois. So, I see that the Republican Party is doing more than just trying to get Latinos to give them their vote. They're actually running Latinos for the highest offices in the country and winning. And they're part of the decision makers at the table. I would have liked to have seen Pat Quinn do something like that here in Illinois. I would have liked to have seen more Latinos on the ballot in this past primary by the Democratic Party. I didn't see that. I saw a lot of 60 and 70-year-old Latinos on the ballot, once again, who'd been in office for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And I just thought, we have a lot of bright, brilliant Latinos in Illinois. Well-educated, well-informed, movers and shakers, good speakers. I mean, seriously. And here that we have Luis Gutierrez. I don't know. Are you Mexican or Puerto Rican, or what kind of Hispanic origin are you?
I am Mexican, born in Mexico.
Okay. I'm born in Chicago. My father's born in Puerto Rico. My mother's born in Texas. But I kept saying the whole time that the immigration movement, when it first started and they held the first immigration march, I said, this can't go anywhere, because the guy at the helm is Puerto Rican, and Boricuas, my side of Boricuas, no, we don't get immigration. We don't get it, because we're natural-born citizens of this country. And everything in Puerto Rico is exactly like, being in New York or in Chicago. There is no Boricua kind of immigration problem. And I said, are the Democrats trying to tell me, or the people who are running the immigration movement trying to tell me that we can't find a well-educated Mexican in the state of Illinois to lead immigration rallies and reforms and marches? I said, oh, no, there's something very wrong with that. I said, this will never succeed until a Latino from the ranks of the people in America who understand America can help lead this reform in immigration. And I said, and I don't get how nobody's found one yet.
Well, I think ideally it would be great to have a very visible, recognizable, and strong voice out of the Mexican community leading the charge on immigration. But I think really the determinant here will be that there be the political will among the leadership in both parties to get this done. Luis Gutierrez, while I would agree that generally the immigrant reality of Puerto Rican people is vastly different from that of Mexicans, Mr. Gutierrez, I think perhaps by default or recognition that his district has a lot of Mexicans, has been, has taken the mantle, for better or worse, and been, doing his part on the immigration issue. But I agree. I think some other things are going to have to happen before, before we have the requisite reforms taking place in that field.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the segments go by fast, and I know our first segment was a little short. We're going to go to some commercial breaks, and we'll be right back. We're talking with Manuel Barbosa, who is a retired judge in bankruptcy court here in the federal level, and who is still a present-day board member of NIU Law School, and the Metro Board, which is very important to us for who like to get around on public transportation. We'll be right back after these commercials and Manuel Barbosa.
Sueño Americano newspaper. Best newspaper in analysis in the state of Illinois. With over 20,000 copies in each edition, El Sueño Americano is available in all versions. El Sueño Americano Lake County, El Sueño Americano Pilsen, El Sueño Americano Southeast, El Sueño Americano Aurora, and sooner in many more regions. El Sueño Americano, the other side of news. The best analysis in regional, state, and national politics. El Sueño Americano is your alternative information in championnews.net, the conservative voice for Illinois news and commentary on education, pensions, and politics.
Welcome back to The Bottom Line. This is Deb Gord-Dills, and I'm so happy that you could stay here to join us. We're heard every day, Monday through Friday, from 5 to 6 p.m. on 1590 a.m., 1470 a.m. If you're closer to Indiana. And Chicago politics every day from 5 to 6 on 1590 a.m. If you missed the show and you want to catch it again tonight, we're on again from 8 to 9 p.m. on 1500 a.m. RadioLatina5.com. So, Manuel Barbosa, thank you and welcome back on my radio show.
Good to be with you.
Great. And so we were talking a little bit about the governor's race and about immigration. Tell me, what are your thoughts on immigration? Do you think we're going to see some small reforms made? Because I seem to think that everybody wants immigration reform. Hello. Nobody wants any kind of laws that are damaging to anybody in a system that doesn't work. But I think I know that the big question is, how do we go about it? I'm from the school that we go about it in small, manageable chunks. You can't fit everybody into the same box. So let's just take a couple of things right now that can be addressed and fix those, and then move on to another portion of immigration that needs to be fixed, and another portion that needs to be fixed, and move in increments instead of trying to make one law that fits everybody in.
Well, I have a very, perhaps, unique view of this whole issue, because I came to this country one of those dreamers. I was born in Mexico, and my parents brought me here when I was only a couple of months old. I grew up being a migrant worker in Texas in the cotton fields. My family immigrated to Nebraska to the beet fields. We came to Illinois working in the tomato fields. And as an advocate and a lawyer, I spent a lot of money, even though I wasn't an immigration lawyer. I did some immigration work when Reagan passed the amnesty bill. But I've been around these people who live this life in the shadows, who are often taken advantage of.
Yeah, you do understand that, and I'm sure you remember that when you were working those fields in Mexico, you were working those fields in Texas, you were working those fields alongside Tejanos who were American citizens, but just because they were brown, it didn't matter. That was the only job offered to them. Because my mother, born in 1937, worked in those fields. And she said, I wasn't an immigrant. My family were not immigrants. We were in Texas when Texas was its own republic. They moved in from Monterey to stop the flow of illegal immigrants into Mexican territory in the Texas region up north. Isn't that funny? So they went out there. Didn't work for them either, as we all know. And they worked the Texas fields because they were brown.
Right. Well, our policy on immigration really has, in many times throughout our history, been somewhat hypocritical. We basically tell people, no, there's a law. It's against the law, but we got these jobs if you can make it over here. And so basically, it's kind of a cruel game. For a period of 10 years, there were about 500 women and children and men who died crossing the Arizona desert every year to come over here to jobs that were offered to them. We tend to tighten the screws at the border when our economy dictates that we do, and we tend to loosen them when we need the labor. And quite frankly, it always regulated itself rather effectively because the labor field is one area where the free market worked very well. People would come when there were jobs; they would go back when there were no jobs. Throughout our history, it's been clear that it's not enforcement of the law that motivates what happens in that area, but rather the fact that we have a lower class of resident that we had created. Throughout our history, going back to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, we've thrown people off their own land in the Southwest, California, after the gold rush. Even in the Midwest, after during the Depression, when we did the repatriation of thousands and thousands of Mexicans, many of whom were actually U.S. citizens. And so there's always this kind of subtle animus that includes an element of race. And for people to say that it's strictly respect for the law, I hesitate strongly, because the fact is we have a law also that provides the most effective weapon in immigration, and that's the employer sanctions, which has rarely been implemented or called upon. So to me, that sort of tells me where people's minds really are on this. I think reform is required, not only because it's the humanitarian thing to do, but piecemeal implementation. When people say piecemeal, it's another way of saying, well, let's hold off here. I don't know if I really want to give these people amnesty, because that's the bad word that's at the bottom of all this.
Right, but I spent 2 years along the Mexican-American border after graduate school, and along the Arizona border just outside of San Luis, and I also got detained at the border for being an arrogant American and leaving my IDs at home and figuring, well, I speak English better than some of the people asking me, are you a U.S. citizen? Thought I'd use that, and it didn't work. So I spent 5 hours in the detention place waiting for them to get me back into the U.S. Very comfortable, by the way. But those 2 years along that border, watching the immigration border, watching the people come by, hearing their stories, it's all about work. But it also made me realize, what are the humanitarian violations occurring in Mexico? I rarely hear that the U.S. administration, the United States presidency, is used in talks with Mexico to discuss the border and the human rights violations that are happening there, that are making people come here. This winter here in the Midwest, we were at times 40 below zero. We had an extremely harsh, cold winter, longer than we ever imagined. I mean, the summer is just starting, like this week, literally the weather, where it hasn't snowed on us. And I think I've been to places in Mexico. It's beautiful. It's a big vacation area for Americans all the time. People are not going to be here freezing in 40-degree weather unless they absolutely have to, because things are so terrible back home. Why are those terrible things not being discussed? Because I see them, I saw them firsthand, and I hear about them. And I want to know, what's the deal that's cut between the United States and Mexico that allows no discussion whatsoever in foreign diplomatic affairs and at the national level to talk about the human rights violations in Mexico where people are leaving? Because if I lived under those conditions, I'd be jumping that fence and getting the heck over here too, and risking my life to get over here. Because you and I, you push a human being into survival mode, they're going to do whatever they need to do. The heck with whatever laws or immigration reform, whatever that is. They're still coming in today, people fleeing for a better life. And it's not just Mexicans, I mean, all through Central America. Heck, the highest deportation rate happens in Mexico, where they're kicking people out who are coming from Central America, South America, or flying in from anywhere else in the world, and using the avenue of Mexico as the easiest entry point into the United States. So why is this discussion not occurring between the United States government and the Mexican government on human rights violations against its own people?
Well, I think it does happen at several levels. There are bilateral talks that go on all the time, but it's always kind of a delicate thing for some reason to diplomatically tell someone else, you're violating people's human rights and it's impacting our country. I don't think, however, that that's the major source of people wanting to immigrate here. In most instances, it's simply an economic reality that people are living in poverty, and at times it reaches that desperation level that makes them take that final act of trying to cross, knowing that it's not going to be easy, that they could even be risking their lives. And I think that's the human element that we have to recognize, and it can be accommodated, I think, with a reasonable policy that does not in any way that actually helps our economy. I think to the extent that we can toughen up the border and the prosecution of people who cross for drug trafficking or other such reasons, I think we can get as tough as we want on those. I think the deportation of people who commit criminal acts on American soil, we can get as tough as we want on those, and perhaps should be a lot tougher. But I think there's a human element there that we can accommodate to the benefit of both countries, and we often lose sight of that.
Recently, Michoacan, a state in Mexico, the very citizens of that state decided, forget reaching out to the federal government and trying to protect and defend our family. They ended up taking up arms and actually fighting the crime elements in their state. And it got to the point, of course, now because of online and radio shows like this, that the federal government brought in and tried to reason with the people of the state and tell them not to be vigilantes and take it into their own hands. But the federal, Michoacan, the state of in Mexico, just felt that at the federal level, they were just not interested in protecting their own people. These are serious events going on. Not that we're not starting to get them ourselves, here in Vegas. I mean, in Nevada, we have Cliven Bundy with a bunch of farmers who took up arms against the federal government and the building land management coming to take over the ranchers' land. That's still an issue that we're addressing here. So, have we just thrown humanitarian rights right out the window, right from the very country here in the U.S. that created these and to begin with? I mean, there's a big question that if you turn the other way, as many years as we've turned the other way from humanitarian rights in Mexico, have we then created an environment within our own country that says, to exercise the same kind of activities against our own people here?
Well, I visit Mexico frequently. I did so sometimes in a semi-official capacity when I was Human Rights, and I visited their National Human Rights Commission as well as other institutions there. And I agree that corruption has been perennially a major problem there, and they've been making progress and inroads, but it's been largely stifled and the violence exacerbated by the narco problems that have been going on in recent years. Now, there's new administration promised to take a new tact. But I think I haven't measured whether the violence is worse or not, but it certainly still exists. The violation of human rights was actually exacerbated by the use of the military to combat the narco violent problem, because the military has now been deployed throughout urban areas in the country, and that has led to abuses as well. So I suppose the president would use the excuse that the violence brought on by the narcos has made it, very difficult to implement all these reforms that would bring tranquility to the country. But I do feel that there has been an effort to do that. However, I don't think that that's a major factor in migration. Migration tends to come from poor people who are desperate for jobs. The kind of migration that the middle class and upper classes do is they send their kids and their families to Miami and other places in Texas to study and live a little more safely.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk more after these commercials. Manuel, just really quickly, you had a background as the chairman of the Illinois Human Rights Violation Commission?
Yeah, Illinois Human Rights Commission.
Illinois Human Rights Commission. Well, in a time when you have the Tea Party crying out and you have Campaign for Liberty saying, they're policing us way too much in Illinois with the red light cameras, speed light cameras, it'd be great to get your insight on it. We're going to have to go to commercial breaks. You've been listening to Deb Gord-Dills, and I've been speaking with Manuel Barbosa, and we'll be back with more on the human rights violations or not, the commission and what it's doing when we come back after these commercials.
Sueño Americano newspaper. Best newspaper in analysis in the state of Illinois. With over 20,000 copies in each edition, El Sueño Americano is available in all versions. El Sueño Americano Lake County, El Sueño Americano Pilsen, El Sueño Americano Southeast, El Sueño Americano Aurora, and sooner in many more regions. El Sueño Americano, the other side of news. The best analysis in regional, state, and national politics. El Sueño Americano is your alternative information in championnews.net, the conservative voice for Illinois news and commentary on education, pensions, and politics.
Hello and welcome back to The Bottom Line with Deb Gord-Dills. Today's radio show, we left off with the Illinois Human Rights Commission and what they're doing or not doing. And my guest today was once a chairman of that commission, Manuel Barbosa. Manuel, welcome back to the show.
Good to be back.
Great. And so tell me, who is the present director of the Illinois Human Rights Commission?
Well, presently, the chairman is Marty Castro, who also happens to be chairman of the Civil Rights Commission, the National Civil Rights Commission. Now, my involvement with the commission, of course, terminated back in 1998 when I became a judge, and I have not necessarily remained, abreast of all their legislative changes and what they're doing. But essentially, the mandate of the commission was the civil rights violations when I was there, and I suspect to a large extent today, the focus was on employment discrimination, although we also covered housing discrimination, access to financial credit, and as well as access to public accommodations.
Yeah, Manuel, are we in different times today? I mean, this is a different period of time. I mean, I was saying this on my show the other day. At my age, I just don't remember as a youth ever worrying about whether or not there was an infringement on the liberties or the freedoms of the institutions that we were surrounded by, whether it be the church or an organization or, some kind of club of community service. I just didn't think, I never felt anything but safe in my country, in America. And I'm looking at this stuff now and I'm thinking, we're getting 5-year-olds who are being arrested for disorderly misdemeanors. Are we in a different time right now? I mean, there's a lot of changes, don't you think?
There's no question. I think that we live in a time when we're all so much more aware of everything that's going on. We've had the information revolution. Even we have the 24-hour news cycle. We have so many things that technology has made available to us that have changed the way we live and our awareness of things around us. So the young people today have an awareness that we never would have had about things going on in the world around them, and that impacts you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I see it in my own children, and I know that, of course, this is what I do for a living, not just the radio show. I don't get paid for the radio show, actually. I do this because I know that the information that we receive in my day-to-day job is an important thing of getting the message out to new Americans, getting the message out to like-minded people, and to get the message out that we are a people of morals and values. It doesn't mean that we always stay on the right road. People fall off all the time. Hell, I know I do. But you got to crawl right back on that path, and you got to try to do what's right. A lot of that comes mainly from maybe my Latino upbringing as a believer, as a person who, your parents put it in your head. You got to do the right thing, and when you don't, you go get on your knees, and then you get up and you start all over again after you've prayed about it. And you just got to keep doing what you think is the right thing to do. And so knowing that, I think we continue to move forward, always with hope and optimism as we're treading in this new age of the drones and the surveillance and the policing that is going on. It's creepy and eerie, but at the same time, we got to stay optimistic that this great country is made up of so many people who believe in the American dream. Whether they've attained it or not, it's embedded in who they are. And this whole sense of never say never. I just think that in there lies the hope. I was in a discussion in a meeting today in between the segments, and I said to them, they were very much concerned that America was going in the wrong direction. They were very much concerned that the monitoring and the policing of the citizens of this country is unlike anything that's happened at all in the history of the United States. And I said to them, but there's hope. There's hope. And the hope is that there's two things that drove Americans to the American Revolution and to be victorious. There's two things. Number one, that God and God himself rules over all people. The inalienable rights that are granted to us. That we don't have to follow a king, a czar, a dictator, or anything. And that core belief in our faith, which we can't shake, which we can't diminish. And the other one is the freedoms and the liberties of the hope that's embedded in our own hearts and souls. The American dream has been tried and trued. I mean, we can give you in the history of the United States over and over and over again success stories. Success stories. We know that this is a form of government that has worked and that gives people an unbelievable amount of prosperity and security. And I don't see how anyone's going to ever be able to get people to forget that or not know that. Not just people in America, but I think we have fans around the world who don't even speak English, who get the American dream. Like they get it, like they hear it, like they themselves would love to be able to attain it if they could get here. And maybe share that spirit on with their children who do make it here. It's not going to be something that's going to be easily erased. I mean, I don't know. What's your thinking on it?
Well, I think that it's very true. I think America is a broad concept that people throughout the world, even people who may think they don't like us, admire, respect, and want to emulate. And in every facet, I think I've done trainings in Latin America on judicial reform. Even people who may be inclined to criticize the United States admire our legal system and are trying in different ways to emulate it. The fact that we're a nation of laws, that people can count on a legal system to redress their problems and bring a semblance of fairness into their lives. They like our culture. So many young people who are growing up even in areas that are hostile to the United States love American music, American culture, American movies, American styles. And the most important thing is that we are the country in the world that people are still trying to come to, whether it be for financial reasons, for opportunities, for education, for whatever. We are a magnet, and people are well aware of our where we've been throughout history. We may have things that are occasionally considered setbacks. After 9/11. We had a debate in this country about whether we wish to sacrifice some of our liberties in the name of security, and it's a legitimate debate. But I believe what someone said, that if you sacrifice your liberties in the name of security, eventually you will have neither. But these are things that Americans have worked out over the years because of our liberties and our freedoms in the free marketplace of ideas in the political system, where people can test these ideas, and generally sooner or later, I think prudence prevails. We can take backward steps. We can do some things that we're not always proud of. But when you have a free people, a free thinking people, with access to all kinds of ideas, eventually we come out on top, and our whole history is one of continuous progress, of forming a better union, of fulfilling the dreams and the promise that our founding fathers built into our system, and I think that there are reasons to be hopeful and optimistic about how we're going to deal with these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear different stories where people say, well, we got to watch out. We have the drones. We have the chemtrails. I don't know how familiar you are with either one of those two forms of supposedly security and warfare that is going to protect America even more. But if you take out the capitalism which this country operates under, a capitalistic society, if you remove that from our country, I think you take away, in fact, a lot of how people make the money they make and make the advances they make to have the kind of life that the American dream sort of represents. And so it's a big caution, to leaders in this country. We need the people. We need the people to continue to dream and to continue to achieve great things that the American dream has allotted them through this capitalistic society that we have in place. It's important to continue to do that, to be able to allow people the freedom to express themselves and to do what they do. I'm always amazed when you get women who denounce this nation and this nation of laws to be able, all because they believe in abortion or they believe in same-sex marriage. All the time I say, I need to remind you that in most nations around the world, you would be executed for those beliefs, or you would be jailed for these expressions, and yet here in America, we have a system that allows people to choose their lifestyle, their private lifestyle. It allows them to choose their faith. It allows them to choose when they have a family, who they marry. So many freedoms are here. And I tell people, eliminate that. Fight against that. Be very careful what you say against the very institution that allows you to be who you are. I mean, we can't allow tolerance to be looked at as a weakness. I just really worry about what is the end goal of people who try to denounce the American capitalistic system and its existence and what it's done here for our nation. And you were a judge. I mean, you would know. I'm sure you've heard tons of cases on this, and I mean, and maybe not, but being in bankruptcy, you probably saw everybody who would lose it.
Well, it's I guess one of the lessons that we would have gotten out of those bankruptcy courts is that in this country you have the freedom to fail or succeed, to be an entrepreneur, to try, to go out and follow your dreams. And sometimes you succeed, sometimes you fail, but it's something that you're at liberty to do in this country, and the opportunities are there for those who recognize them, who know how to take advantage of them, and who have the good fortune to make them work. But I think the important thing is that we have the freedom and the opportunity to succeed and even failure. And in the American system, you can fail today and be successful tomorrow.
Amen to that. Absolutely right. And so that's the beauty of it, that you can continue and redefine yourself and recreate a new career and move in different directions at any age. And those are some great things about our country. You know, we're, again, going to have to go to a commercial break. I know that I keep saying that, but we're going to come back with our last segment and more from Manuel Barbosa when we get back. Thank you so much for listening to Deb Gordills, and we'll be right back.
Sueño Americano newspaper. Best newspaper in analysis in the state of Illinois. With over 20,000 copies in each edition, El Sueño Americano is available in all versions. El Sueño Americano Lake County, El Sueño Americano Pilsen, El Sueño Americano Southeast, El Sueño Americano Aurora, and sooner in many more regions. El Sueño Americano, the other side of news. The best analysis in regional, state, and national politics. El Sueño Americano is your alternative information in championnews.net, the conservative voice for Illinois news and commentary on education, pensions, and politics.
Welcome back. This is Deb Gordills with Manuel Barbosa on today's show. And Manuel sits on the board of the Northern Illinois University School of Law. He also sits on the board for Metra. He has many years retired as a federal judge in bankruptcy court. And at one time early on in his career, he was the assistant state attorney in Kane County, a very Republican place. But he also served as the director and the chairman of the Illinois Human Rights Commission. And although it's been a while since he's had that duty, it's really interesting to hear his whole take on all of these experiences as a Latino, mainstream American, very well achieved, who's held a lot of honors and still continues to hold some. Manuel, welcome back to my show.
Good to be with you.
Great. And so, Latinos, big growth in our population group here in America. No doubt that's not going to change because 57% of voting Latinos are against abortions. So population, literally the American population hangs on the procreation of Latinos in America, because out of the 3 Americans born every day, every moment, 2 out of those 3 are Hispanic, and 1 is white in terms of like the Christian population. So talk to me a little bit more about that. What does that say? People like you and me, I know that I'm super busy because of it, because I'm Latina, half Puerto Rican, half Tejana, or Mexican. It depends on who you're asking. I always feel like we have a responsibility. You have a responsibility. I have one. As mainstream Americans of Hispanic descent, to sort of be leaders in guiding these new generations of Hispanics as we continue to grow in population in America with no end in sight, to be able to sort of forge that between traditional American mainstream values and Latino values with a culture from another country, with rules from other country, with politics from different countries that don't necessarily equate to being familiar in these uncharted political waters here in America. What message would you give to Latinos listening to this show, and many bilingual? There's 60% of my listeners are bilingual. What would you say to them as they're moving forward in choices in their lives, in their careers?
Well, I think the main thing, and I just recently spoke to a graduating class where the student body was largely Hispanic and the parents were almost all Latino, that the education of their children, and education is the primary tool for success in American society, as it is in many other places. But it's particularly important in America because here, anybody, whether you're coming from poverty or anywhere else, that's going to be the key that'll open the door for you. We don't have a social strata where the doors are closed to people who are not coming from money, etc. Education is the key, learning, and there is the power in knowledge as well. We often hear so much among Latino advocacy groups and go to workshops, etc., where everyone talks about leadership and the importance of developing leadership. Well, there is something to that, but I remember reading an article that said that it's questionable why we put so much emphasis on that when other migrating ethnic groups throughout the world, notably the Indian, Jewish, and the Asian populations, have succeeded in almost any environment that they've emigrated to without any talk of leadership, any discernible leaders, but rather a spirit of collaboration and a search for education have been the ingredients that have brought success to all these other immigrant groups. And I think we have to follow that formula too. And we see that it does work. I mean, a lot of times people look for progress that comes with horns blaring and drums, etc. In my community, I remember there was an article out here in King County done a while back where all these so-called community leaders were lamenting the absence of what they would call a big leader, a large politically elected body of Latinos, and sort of saying, well, we haven't progressed. There's so many of us, and we haven't elected, this or that. And I looked at it and I said, sometimes progress, you don't have to elect the president to show that you advanced. Sometimes progress comes in surreptitiously. It creeps into your consciousness, and you wake up one day and you realize that the sons and daughters of landscapers and restaurant workers have now gone to college, and now many of them are teaching in your schools. Many of them are working in your banks, your hospitals, and your public service buildings. And then one day you look around and you realize in Kane County, our chief judge in this court system was black. The sheriff, the highest law enforcement officer in the county, was Hispanic. The school superintendent for the county was Hispanic. The superintendent of schools for the second largest school district in the county was Hispanic. And people are sitting around waiting for the drum bugles and and the band to play and for somebody to say that we've elected so many people. You have to look around and be able to see the progress. And you can measure it in small increments. Every morning when a mother gets up and feeds her kids breakfast and sends them off to school, making sure their homework is done, that's progress. It's not always about the big dramatic move.
Yeah, I get that if I were in Mexico or Colombia or Brazil or in another country where I'm trying to have the average person who first generation college graduate from the landscaper, from the the milkman, that whole bit. But I think for me in America, being raised in mainstream America, growing up with so many kids who had Hispanic surnames but didn't speak any Spanish, and surrounded by so many of them and going off to school, I think there's a stronger message we have to give to Latino families, especially when it pertains to the females, their daughters. They're so afraid to let them go on to college, and they're so afraid to let them become achievers because they don't, culturally, they want to keep their daughters close because they don't want them to engage in inappropriate and immoral behavior that goes on college campuses across the country. Like, I get all that. But there has to be a college education given to to these women, and there has to be an encouragement of our young Hispanic men, first and second generation. At what point do we say, stop settling for less? You know, you are now a second generation or third generation American Hispanic. You know, it's time to put on that leadership hat. And maybe the problem is that culturally, grandparents come from countries where they're not in the social class that's allowed to advance, and our political structure, especially within the Democratic Party, the political structure is so much not who wants to rise from the people as much as we're going to pick who we want out of this group of people, and everybody's going to support them or vote for them. And so it's like who is chosen and who's appointed, and not really based on what you know as much as it's who you know. I have a hard time buying into that whole let's be grateful for what we have philosophy. Not to say that we shouldn't, but I had this discussion with U.S. Senator Ted Cruz of what it's like to be a mainstream American who happens to be of Hispanic descent. Me on my end, I'm 100% Latina with the Puerto Rican and the Texas influence, but he was half Cuban, half Irish, and so it is. We both agreed that there is a responsibility on our part as mainstream Latinos to sort of encourage Latinos to run for leadership positions. In my case, it's politically. I mean, in my case, I'm always looking for the Latino who wants to run for office, be it alderman, a committeeman, a congressman, a state senator, or House representative. I'm constantly looking for women and Latino candidates, or, just anybody who's a good conservative who's going to do the will of the people and not the will of the party. That's always the kind of person I'm looking for. But I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm not ideological, I should tell you, and I've supported candidates on both sides. I don't believe that we have any magic formulas that either side has ownership of, and I frankly believe that labels can sometimes be counterproductive, and that every issue should be judged on its merits and not the label that that some ideology attributes to it. I do think it's important that we have people representing us in the halls, where policies are made.
Yes,
that is a sign of progress. It's quite frankly necessary. Mm-hmm. Get ahead and have your voice heard.
Sure.
But I also believe that that leadership comes in many forms and can be exercised in many forums and places where it helps people get ahead. Sure. I recently spoke to a group. Actually, they were going through a leadership training, Hispanic parents, and I told them I think it's great, Joe. You could start get appointed to local boards and commissions in your municipality. Run for alderman. Run for offices that you feel you've prepared yourself for, and that you have a passion about going there and getting some things done.
Sure.
But by the same token, be aware that there are people in our community who have great influence, who are some of the biggest movers and shakers, and have never run for anything.
Right. Well, leadership can be it can be quantified in so many different areas, and not necessarily political life, but it can be involved in a school, it could be involved in a community, it could be a one-time deal in just trying to get old trees, cut down in your neighborhood, or a street repaired, but becoming involved and becoming engaged and becoming a part of this great American country, I think is the message we have to continue to tell people is take ownership, because you're here for the long haul, and we have so many things that we need to constantly evolve with as we're confronted with these changes as we are right now at this time in this nation, in this country. And you're right. The one thing we are number one first is an American.
Okay. I would agree. I would agree with that, and I also agree with the fact that I think those of us who have been around the block, so to speak, have an obligation to encourage and direct others to move into those leadership positions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, Manuel Barbosa, I have just enjoyed tremendously hearing about your experience and your thoughts on everything. I don't think this will be the last time I'll have you on the show or the last time people are going to hear from you. Again, Manuel Barbosa has been my guest, and he is presently sitting on the board at NIU Law School in DeKalb and also on the board at Metra. And thank you so much for sharing your insights, Manuel.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay, and hopefully we'll hear from you again. You enjoy your day now. You've been listening to Deb Gordills here on Political Talk Show Radio in Chicago. We'll see you again tomorrow at 5 o'clock to 6 p.m. Hope you enjoyed the show. Take care. Thank you, Manuel.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sueño Americano newspaper. Best newspaper in analysis in the state of Illinois. With over 20,000 copies in each edition, El Sueño Americano is available in all versions. El Sueño Americano Lake County, El Sueño Americano Pilsen, El Sueño Americano Southeast, El Sueño Americano Aurora, and sooner in many more regions. El Sueño Americano, the other side of news. The best analysis in regional, state, and national politics. El Sueño Americano is your alternative information in championnews.net. The conservative voice for Illinois news and commentary on education, pensions, and